Hello. This is my first time doing anything like this, so what the heck? Might as well give it a try because I'm in the process of actually doing this, so in case anyone was wondering how to do it and wanted to see how someone else had done it, great. So, first off, what am I doing? Well, what I've tried to do is I've tried to set up my printers, all of them using a Raspberry Pi with a camera, to do something called Octopi, so I can go through and actually be able to remotely control them, remotely send data to them, and see what they're doing. It's going to be difficult in the video to see this, but you can see here, you can keep track of the temperatures, you can control it and make it do things, you can look at the G code, you can see the terminal and see what it's doing, you can do other things like see the webcam, so it loads up the webcam and you can see the printer that's right behind me. It's set up and you can see what's going on if it was actually printing. So realistically, it's just a neat little setup to be able to control your printer without actually having a computer hooked up to it. I've generally used computers because I prefer actually having something I can look at and see what's going on rather than having the printer itself running off an SD card and not really seeing as well what's going on. So with that being said, it's a Raspberry Pi. I bought this on Amazon. It was mainly a kit. The camera was one kit, and the Raspberry Pi and power supply were another kit. The only thing I had to provide was the SD card that goes into it that holds all the data. So where do you start? Well, I'm not going to show how to put together the camera module and all of that. I'm not going to show how to put together the Raspberry Pi into the case. You're going to have to figure that out on your own because it's going to vary depending on what case you get and what hardware you buy. But just know that there's a lot of great stuff on Amazon that's relatively cheap. Total, I think the Raspberry Pi was $70 for, this is a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus or whatever it ends up being at this point. Raspberry Pi 3 Model B. Don't generally get the Raspberry Pi 4s. I know that they're new, but I know that they've been having a lot of problems with them overheating and other things. And a Raspberry Pi 3 is more than enough power for what you're really going to be doing. With that being said, you need an SD card. In this case, it's a micro SD. Roughly speaking, I went with a 16 gig in this. I know that you can also use 8 gigabyte ones. Other people use much larger. Larger card, all it really does is give you more storage for the files that you're going to be storing on there, which for the most part, I generally delete as I print them anyway, because I don't want to have to be able to scroll through a whole bunch of files. With that being said, 16 gigs is more than adequate. I think you only use about 4.5 or so gigs worth of data storage for the actual Raspberry or Octopi print image that goes onto it. So you'd still have at least 3 gigs worth of data, even if you used an 8 gig card. So again, that's up to you. So from there, let's get into actually doing the SD card part. And to do that, alright. So now that we're here, so the first thing to do is you have to go to the actual Octoprint website. This is octoprint.org. You can click the download link and you'll get to this page. And just download whatever the latest Octopi image is. In this case, it's Octopi 0.17.0. I think that's the latest image. There's also a tutorial here on what to do and how to do it. You can follow that. It's fairly good. It's all a matter of what you want to set up and what you want to do as well. That being said, first thing, then it talks about using Etcher. So if you middle click and open up, you can download this file. Download for Windows or Mac. There's Mac OS or Linux if that's what you're using. download it, and all this is used for is for writing an image to the SD card. So I've already installed Etcher. So I'll go and select the image. In this case, it's Octopi 0.17.0. And then I have this set to the SD card. And then click Flash. This is going to bring up this, and it's going to ask you if you want to do it. In this case, you want to flash it, so go ahead. And eventually you'll see here it comes to flashing, and it has an ETA of how long it's going to take. I've already done that. I already have a micro SD card installed on here that's already been flashed. I'm just showing this for your reference. So, with that being said, the first thing, even here, it says if you want to connect via Wi-Fi. I'm old school. I don't like having things set up through Wi-Fi like this, especially I want to say something as critical as this. So I didn't set this up. Needless to say, if you would like to set that up, you just have to open up this file, octopi-wpa-supplicant.txt, using Notepad++ or some other utility. It mentions not to use WordPad in Windows or TextEdit in Mac OS X because those text editors will add extra data to it and mess up the file, and then the Octoprint image won't be able to understand it. So don't use those. From there, then it talks about actually hooking everything up. So, it says boot the Pi from the card. So at this point, you want to hook everything up. So I'm going to hook up my network port first, and then hook up my power. And you can't see it, but there's a little power light in the back corner that's lit up now. And it'll go through and do a whole bunch of stuff. You can't really see that, so I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more. Now you can see the Octopi there. So now it's booting up and it's doing a whole bunch of things. This may take up to... So you can see that the camera started to flash a little bit. Yeah, see? So now it's actually booting up Octopi at this point. And there you go. So now it's booted up to a degree. That. Now, the biggest problem I end up having when I'm doing this is I generally can't find it. They say, you can go to this octopi.local or the IP address. Well, finding the IP address is kind of hard a lot of the times, especially if you're like me and have things set up a certain way. So what I end up doing is going into my router, logging in, and I'll do a client list. You can look through and find out which ones are like Octopi. Like this one I know is my, I think this 9.6 one is a new one that I haven't had before. The 5.7 is the one CR10S5 that I have. The 9.2 is my CR10V2. So I think this 9.6 is the one that I want to go to. So if I go to https://192.168.1.96. So I'm presented with this. This is just Chrome telling you that the info on the website that it's running isn't matching what you expect, but it is fine because it's a local network. It's something that you expect it to be. So if you click the advanced button here that I just did, you'll see it says proceed to this website, and it says unsafe, but it's fine. So you click on it, and hopefully it eventually decides to load. I know that the first time that this loads, it can take a while. So you can see, yes, it finally did load. And it's telling you that, you want to set it up. And this is just a general setup. You go through. For me, I'm going to do my normal stuff. And I keep access control enabled and log in. Click next. I usually disable anonymous tracking just because I don't want it to be tracked in any way. This is just setting up internet connectivity check. You can enable it. Honestly, it really doesn't matter all that much. So enable it, click next. I usually enable the blacklist processing so that way you're not installing any plugins that are bad. The name, so I'm going to call this CR10S5-2. And this is a CR10S5. Print and build volume. So here you're just setting up your printer profile. So I named it, since I have two of them. I already have the first one named, so I'm naming this a different name. Print volume, just set this up. In this case, this one is real easy to set up because it's 500 by 500 by 500. And keep going from there. I forgot to do axes. For the most part, you can leave these things standard. It doesn't really matter that much. But they should be fine. Nozzle diameter. So in this case, I know that mine is 0.8. So I'm changing that just to get it correct. And this is just a warning telling you that you shouldn't leave it running while you're not there. And that's generally good advice. Now, at this point, I don't have the printer connected to the Octopi. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to disconnect something. Now, I've connected the printer to it. Now, the first thing to look at here is you have your connection. I always do save connection settings and auto connect on server startup, because that way if say something happens and it reconnects, it'll reconnect and you'll be able to have that. But once everything's connected and it seems okay, you can click connect. And you'll see that it found the printer. There's two easy things to do. You can see all of this stuff, right? So this, I believe, is the card on the printer itself, which I don't care for, so I am going to disconnect that card. All right. That being said, I'm going to okay. So these are still reading from the card itself. Personally, ignore that for now. Okay, so here you have your general setup. This is not with everything installed. There's no issues. One of the things to keep track of is if you see something up here, I don't see it on that one. What's that? Sometimes you may get an error up here. If the power supply that you're using for your printer isn't sufficient, it'll cause the Raspberry Pi itself to throttle. And when it throttles like that, you won't be able to use plugins or update or run plugins because it can't run at a fast enough speed to handle that. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's one of the reasons I buy the kits, because then it comes with a power supply that's going to work fine and you're not going to have any issues with it. So again, just something to keep in mind. At one point I was trying to use power supplies from Five Below and cords from Five Below, and it just never really worked well. they just never really, I couldn't get them to run at the voltage that they needed, and they would always be throttling. So I've been sticking with buying the actual supplies with the Raspberry Pi, and that's been working out very well. So I would I recommend those kits. That being said, moving on. So now you have the general setup here. You have your files where you can upload your G code. You can control it. You can see here. You have the. So now I'm in, and you can see it in the camera. Um, if I had the printer on and running, I could, home it and do all that kind of stuff. I can look at the G code and the layers if I had something loaded. Here's the terminal, and it's telling you, what the temperatures of it are. So, and if I wanted to run a time lapse at some point, I could. So this is the general interface. But now we get into the fun stuff. So now this is general behavior with the connection to the printer, and for the most part, you can leave this alone. Printer profiles, just, you already made the profile, leave it alone. Temperatures, you can add more here, but personally I just leave it go because I manually type things in. If you wanted to add your own settings and do things like add a PETG or a thermoplastic or a Ninja Flex or whatever setup, you could do that. It's very simple and easy to do, but all that really does is add information on the screen and let you be able to change the temperature that you're going to set it to if you're doing some things manually. I don't find it very helpful for myself, so I don't do anything with it. Terminal filters, I generally leave all those go. G-code scripts, I leave this go simply because all my G-code scripts have everything built into them, so I don't have to add anything here. That deals with setting up your slicer and how it generates your G-code. My program that I use something called Simplify 3D. I have a profile set up for each one of the printers that has G-code specific to that printer itself that handles the startup, the print job when it's completed or canceled, and things of that nature. So, again, that's entirely up to you. Features, these are just general selections for different things. I don't touch them. I leave them go. Webcam, again, it's webcam. You can add this information. You can change, flip it horizontally or vertically or rotate 90 degrees depending on what your situation is. In one case, for one of my printers, I had to do a couple of those options because of how the webcam was mounted, because it's mounted directly on the printer, whereas with the other two, the camera is just sitting on top of the printer pointed at the bed. So, again, you can change that however you want. Access control, this is just setting up your user, and that's just, you did that at the beginning. There's a G-code visualizer. Again, I don't worry about it too much. For the most part, I leave a lot of these settings all alone. I don't play with anything. The main thing I do is I go down here to this plugin manager. And then here, I'll just go through and look at all the various plugins that I generally want. The one thing, now these are the ones that are already installed. Okay, and I'm not going to go through what all these are and what they do and such. But the one thing that I generally do is I go get more. And now this brings up the repository. And this gives you all the plugins that are already shown for Octopi that are available publicly on Octopi's website. And you can go through and pick out all the different ones that you want. There's certain ones that are nice. It all depends what you're looking for. The one thing I'm gonna say, and this is a matter of opinion, is there is a one that a lot of people like to use, and I found that I'm not a big fan of it. Where is it? It is Touch UI. So, a lot of people love using the Touch UI interface. and I just don't care for it. Personally, yeah, it's great for the mobile interface to a degree, but I find that it gets rid of a lot of the very evident settings and buttons on the main page for it, which makes it very difficult to navigate if you're not 100% used to using it, and you just spend a lot more time looking for things. The general Octopi or Octoprint web page is kind of cluttered on a phone, but I'm not doing things from a phone for the most part. I rarely do anything from my phone with these because I have to generate the G code on my computer. So for me personally, I just find that the Touch UI is just a very poor replacement for the regular Octoprint web page. Uh, Maybe you like it, maybe you love it, and you give it a try if you want. But personally, I found that I'm just not a fan of it, and I just thought I would make that known. After all that, there's tons and tons of different web plugins and such that you can find in here. You know, Here's one that's webcam tab. It moves it from the controls tab into its own tab. I generally install this because I don't necessarily want the webcam shown on the controls tab. It kind of makes it cluttered in a way. So if I click install, it goes through and does it all by itself. And now it's done. You can click close, and if you want, you can keep installing other ones. Um, you know, let's see. Here's an STL viewer. So this is something I generally install. And some of these take, a couple seconds to install. Some of them have taken, a long time. I install this sidebar status line. Let's see. Let's see. There's all kinds of things. If you wanted to do Slack integration and be able to make a Slack channel for your printer and be able to see that through Slack. Resource monitor to see how much everything's being used on the print or on the Raspberry Pi. There's things specific to, say, the Prussia series of printers. I generally install the progress title so that way you can see what's going on and how far it's progressed through the print. Mainly up here in the status bar, so you can see how it says 0%. That's because it's already finished. There's all different kinds of things in here. And, like I said, I really recommend going through and just looking at all the different ones that are in here. You know, Here's the Octoprint temps graph one. This one I like because it lets you zoom in and see temperature on it. Sometimes that's helpful if you want to look and be able to see if something happened or there was a problem. Maybe the temperature on your hot end dropped and you can't see that easily just in the regular setup. So you want to zoom in and be able to see it more precisely. You can add, it adds supports for slicing directly to it. You can do that. I personally don't care for Slicer, so I don't use it. But again, maybe you love Slicer and you like it and you want to set that up, go for it. It's there. Let's see. So again, there's just, and I mean, there is tons and tons of things on here that you can look at and find. There's a Discord bot for Octoprint that you could install. Again, if you're big into Discord, I know I use it a little bit. You can do that. There's bed leveling wizards here. Let's see. Again, tons and tons and tons. M73 progress, so I install this because then it also displays on the printer itself on the display of the printer, it'll display how far it's done printing, which is just kind of nice when you're walking by. You don't have to load up the website to look at it, since I generally come down and look at my printers when they're printing. As you can hear right now, I don't have any printers going. I'm kind of lazy right now. This is a neat one to install, is the bed level visualizer. I'd have to go through and really set that up, and that's a kind of long process that I haven't done recently, so I'm not going to go through it with this video. But just know that it is there. If you use an auto bed leveling system, that's great for being able to visualize how level your bed is from the auto level sequence. An auto bed leveling expert setup that you can use for it as well. Again, lots of different things to try out. It's one of these things where I say the best thing to do is play with it to find out what you like. And so we'll close this. And now the thing is you don't notice all the new plugins you installed down here. So if you save all that and it saves it, now you're back to the main page and you see you installed all these. Click Restart Now, and this will restart Octoprint. Alright, so you're probably going, what the hell, Aaron, what just happened? Well, believe it or not, my batteries died. I went through 3 batteries. Apparently these aren't holding a charge very well. The joys of technology and batteries for cameras. That being said, now we're back to this. I literally pretty much finished this video and spent about 20 minutes talking, and this camera wasn't even recording it. You can imagine my frustration right now. Anyway, okay, so we're back to the main page. We've restarted. We've gone through all the updates that happened with Octopi, and we're back to the main page. And so here you can see temperature graphs. If you wanted to set a temperature, these are the actual temperatures. You can see it's 21 degrees for the hot end or the tool. The bed is at 20.5 degrees, and if you click here, you can change it. So let's say we set it to 200, or let's say we just set it to 50 degrees and hit enter. You can see that the actual now climbs up to 50, and you'll slowly see the hot end changing temperature, and you'll see this is going up in temperature. You could set the bed to 25 degrees, hit enter. You'll see the bed target went up to 25, and the bed will start heating up, and you'll see that this 21 will turn into something a little bit higher in a second. Now it's almost 22. So you can see that, and for the most part, if you want, if you click here, you can have, these are the settings that they had. So if you wanted to set it for PLA or the presets, so when you were in your setup and you were looking at the presets, you could add those in. And same here for the bed. They have the same setups. Me, I don't use it. I usually just type in whatever I want because that's just me. In this case, I'm going to set it back to 0, so you'll see the target drops back to 0 for the hot end. If I click on the bed and hit 0 again and hit enter, you see the bed goes back to 0. Anyway, so that's how the main page works with temperature. With control, if you click on it, here's all your different settings to control. If you click the home, it'll home the X and the Y axis, and this will move it back in the Y axis, forward in the Y axis, left and then right in the X axis. For the Z, you could home, you could raise it, lower it, and here you can change how far it moves with each button push. Let's say you only wanted to move 0.1 millimeters, and then when you hit one of these buttons, it'll move that. There's 1, 10, 100 millimeters. You can change the feed rate, and you can do that here as well. I leave it at 100 just because it's me. Here you can select your tool for the hot end, and you can change how far it's going to move. Let's say you wanted it to move 10 millimeters, and then you could click extrude or retract. You can change the flow rate again by moving this or clicking here and changing it. One thing to note, though, again, with the hot end is if your hot end is not hot, if your hot end isn't up at 200 degrees, let's say, the extruder isn't going to move. The printer knows that your hot end isn't hot, so it won't be able to extrude, so it won't extrude for you. Just something to keep in mind. Here you have the motors off button. That would make it so you can move your print bed or your any of the extruder motors without any resistance from the motors themselves. The fan, this is the fan for the part cooling, so you can click this and it'll turn that fan on. Click fan off, it'll turn the fan off. Then there's the G-code viewer. It's not going to show anything because there's no G-code right now. However, if I come over here and let's say I go to my G-code folder and I upload, let's just say this one. So I'll copy this over. This is one of the parts for this one sword I was printing recently. So if I click this, it'll load the file, and you'll see it loads it up here, ready to be printed. You can see it's loading it in to be able to render it, and it'll read in all the data in each level, and now you can see how it's showing you how it's going to print. And if you click next layer, and it shows each of the layers, and then you can also use this to scroll up, and it'll show you where it's printing for each layer. This also will show you each one of the moves, so you can change and see each one of the individual moves that it does as it prints, and you can see how it's moving and what's extruding and such. If you wanted to see that and be able to analyze it manually. Here. For the most part, you don't have to worry about it too much. I usually do this in my slicer anyway, or on my program that I generate the G-code. The terminal here, this just tells you what the printer's saying, and you can send lines to it. Here it's saying the temperature of the hot end is 34.17, and the target is 0. The bed is 24.5, and the target's 0. If you wanted to send it a command, so let's say you reprogrammed your printer with new firmware, which you did because you upgraded some part. In my case, let's say I added the auto bed leveling setup to it, and I needed to set it up, so I could sit here and if I needed to load the custom default EEPROM settings, I could do that, and then I could measure and figure out what the offset is from the bed leveling, and then from there I could save that into the EEPROM, which is what I do, and then that way I don't have to tell it anything special. I just tell it do the auto bed leveling, and it figures everything out on its own, and I don't have to tell it stuff. That's just how I do it. There's plenty of different ways, and other people will tell you have different ways of doing it. To each their own. But this is just nice because then you can be able to send it custom commands if you needed to do special things. Time-lapse tab, this just allows you to set up a time-lapse video if you wanted using the webcam. STL viewer. In this case, I don't have an STL, but I have this one still loaded from previously when I was doing the video about 20 minutes ago. But let's just say I uploaded an STL, so I'll go back to my SolidWorks files to get the STL. So let's see, I'll copy this one over now. So now there's an STL. I can click here, and it'll load this STL file and render as smooth. So now it's showing you the smoothed file. There's different rendering modes. So flat, so now it's just rendering a flat image, and it lets you see all the edges with a lot less shading and such. There's also a wireframe, so you can see all the triangles that make up the STL file. And then there's points, so that just shows you all the different points through that wireframe. For the most part, I would just leave it as flat if you were using this. I don't really use this much, but I install it just in case, mainly because I slice all my files on my computer and then upload the G-code from it. With that said, I'm going to delete it, and finally there's the webcam. So the webcam is showing you the camera that I'm using to shoot this right now on the tripod. This is nice because I'll have this pointed at the bed, and you can see, like I'll wake up in the morning and let's say I load it up and I can look at it and see, is the print done? And I can physically see that, oh yeah, it's done, or maybe I wake up and find out that I have nothing but a bunch of spaghetti on my printer because it didn't stick to the bed right, or some other reason, or maybe there wasn't enough glue on the print bed and the thing ended up falling over. That's the reason I like having the webcam, is so I can view it remotely. Again, I like it. It only costs roughly $15 for a generic one on Amazon. and to set it up is very quick and easy. So that's what I do. Needless to say, everyone has their own way of doing things, so go from there. At this point, if I go back to temperature, you can see the temperature and how it's changing. One thing I didn't show was, you can zoom in with the one feature that I installed. So you can zoom in and see how the temperature changed and see all the different steps and how it and whatnot. Again, it's great for troubleshooting if you need that. There's controls up here at the top, so you can go reset everything. It shows everything in real time. Then you can, you can do all kinds of other little things, compare data, whatever. There's all kinds of little settings. So. Lastly, so down here in the files, you could create a folder and have a folder to save everything in. Let's say you wanted to make, you're going to start putting a whole bunch of data on here. You wanted to put a whole bunch of files and print, and you wanted to save it in folders that correspond to what you're printing for each one. You could make a folder for, Rurouni Kenshin sword or, Halo helmet or whatever, and then put all the G-code or STL files in there. So that way it's separated and you're not just seeing a list of files. Again, each person has their way they want to do it. However you want to do it, that feature's there. You can use it. Under each file then there's, additional stuff. You can see here where it tells you to hit the down arrow and it shows you additional data. So let's say the size, the model, size of the file, how long ago it was uploaded, what the model is, and how big it is. So it tells you the size of it. It tells you about how much filament it'll use and how long it'll take to print. Do that. Here you can download that G-code file back to your computer if you'd like. This one allows you to delete the file. This one allows you to load it to the printer, which it already is. And if I hit this button, it would start printing using that file. I'm going to delete it because I'm done with it. And you can see it's gone now. Down here it tells you how much free space there is and how much total space there is on your SD card left over. So this was a 16 gig SD card. It says there's 11.7 gigs left, so it gives you an idea of how much space you use installing Octopi. And with that, I am done. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned something maybe. I don't know. Let me know if you want something else. I'm contemplating doing some other videos, specifically with my CR10 and changing the hot end and adding the auto bed leveling and other things. But it takes time to make these videos, so it's going to be a slow process. But hopefully I'll get better. In the meantime, hopefully you had fun, learned something, and maybe you'll give it a try. It's kind of fun. Until next time.